Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Cynthia Holt, and I am the Executive Director for the Council of Atlantic Academic Libraries here in the Atlantic region. Welcome. I think we have CAAL and COPL members on board here today, so thank you all for joining. First off, just a few housekeeping things. Just because we have some members coming or some people coming in on low bandwidth, we ask that you keep your camera turned off unless you're speaking and you like to open it up when you're speaking. Also, we ask that you mute your mics if you're not speaking. When we get to the Q&A section and you want to ask your question in person, feel free to unmute and turn on your camera at that point. But otherwise, if you can keep your camera off and your mic off, that would be great. I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or whatever, just please put them into the chat. And we will have a Q&A session right after Alexandra does the initial presentation of information and somewhat of a demo. And then we will move into the Q&A. And then at the end, we will have time for breakout rooms as well for folks to talk to each other around what projects and things like that. But at this point, I would like to recognize that CAAL-CBPA members sit on unceded and traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq, Beothuk, Innu, Inuit, Wolastoqiyik, and the Pescataway peoples. Treaties of peace and friendship were first signed in 1725 between the British Crown and the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik peoples. Those treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between the nations. We acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the first peoples of this region, and we express our gratitude as guests on this land. So welcome everybody again. For those of you who have just recently joined us, we are recording this session. The recording will be available on the CAAL website and as well as the AtlanticOER website and the CAAL YouTube channel after the session. It should be sometime this afternoon. In the meantime, without further ado, I am going to introduce Alexandra Marcaccio, who is our AtlanticOER lead, and she is our guru of all things OER here in the Atlantic region. Alexandra.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, we'll get started. I'll share my screen. I've got some slides for everyone so we can follow along. It's taking a minute. Here we go. Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm here to provide just a bit more information and hopefully give you time to ask and get your questions answers about this year's 2025 AtlanticOER Development Grant season. So to just kind of go over what we'll do, I'm going to start by giving an overview of the development grants, walk you through the different tiers of funding, what kind of projects might be eligible for a grant. We're then going to actually look at the application in a bit more detail. So I'll go through several of the questions that are a part of the application that you would put together, kind of give you some prompting questions, some ideas of what we might be looking for. I'll also be giving you an overview of the evaluation criteria that this year's adjudicators will be using to evaluate applications. We're then going to spend quite a bit of time with Q&A. I want to make sure that you all have time to answer your questions. So this first part where I'll be speaking won't be the bulk of the session. The Q&A really will be. And then with time at the end, what I'm going to do is a bit of workshopping. So we'll split off into breakout rooms, give you all a chance to kind of discuss your ideas, get feedback, etc. So let's start with the grant overview. So we'll start pretty simply. What are the AtlanticOER development grants? These are grants that are providing financial support to educators at publicly funded post-secondary institutions in Atlantic Canada. So as long as the lead applicant is a member of one of these publicly funded post-secondary institutions, they can apply for a grant. Our hope and our purpose in doing this is to encourage folks to create and adapt new OER that can be used in credit-bearing courses at these publicly funded post-secondary institutions. So something we'll talk about later with the application is that this is a requirement for the grants, is that the OER that you will be proposing must be used in a credit-bearing course at a publicly funded post-secondary institution. So there are several different tiers of funding depending on the scale of the project being proposed and the work involved. So our largest scale is a large scale course material. So this is a creation tier, and this is for up to $7,000. The idea is that this is usually for things like textbooks or those larger scale projects that you're building from scratch. We're hoping, and we'll talk a bit about this later, the topic shouldn't really be covered in an already existing OER. So a good example is there are quite a few OER out there for first year chemistry courses. We would want to see something a bit different, something that maybe there isn't a suitable OER for currently. The next tier is adaptation. So this is taking an existing OER, an openly licensed material, and modifying it in the ways that you need to best suit your course. So this is for up to $4,000. A good example, again, there are several OER that are first year introductory chemistry books, but often say if you found one that you like that's from the United States, their education standards might be different. And so there might be some work that has to be done to modify or adapt content to meet Canadian education standards or to include examples that are relevant in the Atlantic region. And our final tier is smaller scale creation projects. So these are typically things like ancillary materials, and this is for up to $1,000. So this isn't for the core educational resources. Think of this as something that would be used to create supplementary support resources that students could have access to. So some examples might include slide decks that they could have access to that are openly licensed, or quiz banks that you want them to use that accompany already existing course materials. So again, think of this as a smaller scale version of that large grant. So if you should receive a grant, there are several expectations that we have of grant recipients. So commence the project in the year that you receive funding. This isn't something where you receive funding and get started at a later date. We want the projects to start immediately. We ask that you complete the project in 2 years. You will be submitting regular progress reports that provide updates on the project. This will be done with a template that we provide you. And this is partially so we can ensure, accountability, but also so we can see how we might be supporting you throughout the project. There will also be an end of project report that will be completed at the end of the grant cycle. Grants must be acknowledged in any publications or presentations that are a result of the project or a result of the grant. And projects should be used a Creative Commons or other open license. This is the standard for OER, is that open educational resources are openly licensed. So we would like to see that Creative Commons. We do, however, make exceptions in some cases. So a strong example of this is Indigenous traditional knowledge, where there are cultural protocols around how that knowledge can be circulated. We do make exceptions in these cases, and we ask that you indicate that you might need an exception in your proposal, in your application. And finally, projects should be accessible for learners with disabilities. We want to see resources that are as accessible as possible. So making sure you're doing things like adding alt text to images that you have, transcripts for any audio files that might be a part of the OER, those sorts of things. So this is a yearly grant cycle, and this is our timeline this year for 2025. So January 6th, so last week, our applications opened. You can go to our website, AtlanticOER, which you can see the URL at the bottom left corner of the screen. You apply there, and applications are due Friday, February 14th, 2025. I will then take the applications. They will be put through a single blind process, and then adjudicators will spend time grading the applications. And once we have determined who the successful recipients are, successful applicants will be noted approximately mid-March of this year. And then we will be distributing funds to recipients through their institution's grant office. Now, if several folks are applying as a team, say from several different institutions together, there will be, we will ask you to name the lead project applicant, and that's where the funding will go, to that lead applicant's institution. So that's just a quick overview of the grants themselves, but what I really want to spend time on is going through the actual application itself, going through the questions and giving you a sense of what we're looking for with each question on the application. So the first question is that we ask for a project description. So we just want to make sure that we understand what the project is that you're proposing, what you're hoping to do with the grant money. So here are some prompting questions that could be helpful to you, just so you know what we're looking for. So first, what kind of resource are you proposing? Are you proposing a textbook? Are you proposing a series of podcasts? give us a sense of what that is, what topics will be covered in the resource. So your subject area and the specific topics within it. We need to know what course or courses, if this is a resource that could be used in multiple courses, where the resource will be used moving forward. This is a requirement of the grant. There will be another spot on the application where you will indicate that, but it's also helpful to have it here too. And then a bit about how you might go about creating the resource. So for example, we've seen resources created in the past where it's actually students who are leading the writing of the textbook. So is that something you're doing here where students will be contributing original work to the resource? Are you writing this resource yourself with the help of a research assistant? Are you perhaps going through and doing a review of a current textbook and then doing some work to develop new case studies and things to add to that as part of an adaptation project? So give us that sense of how, briefly, of how you'll go about creating the resource. Next is a question about a needs assessment. So here we just want to understand why there is a need for the resource you're proposing. So for example, say you teach in a subject area where there's not a lot of course materials out there, and especially no openly licensed course materials that students could access. That could be a strong justification for why you would need this resource. If you're adapting a resource, consider why there is a need for the adaptation. So is there something lacking, say suitable case studies in this? Is there some extra content that needs to be added for that resource that you're adapting to really suit your course needs? So a couple things to consider here is there a lack of resources that cover this topic? What gaps exist in any openly licensed resources that already exist that you need to be addressing? What are the challenges that may exist with some of those already existing resources? So, for example, different education standards, a lack of Canadian-focused case studies, issues with accessibility, those sorts of things. Next, these are two different questions, but we ask about your goals for the project and the potential impact of the project. So for the goals, we just want to make sure that those goals are reasonable and well scoped to a 2-year creation or adaptation project and that suit your actual project. Good tip is to always use the SMART goal format to really make sure that you're scoping your goals and these are things that are measurable. Next is the impact part. Now, we do not see impact of OER in one singular light. There are different ways that we can measure the positive impact that OER can have on student learning. So because these are openly licensed resources that students can freely access, that could mean that you are saving students money because you are replacing a currently very expensive commercial textbook with your new resource. And that is definitely one positive impact. That is not the only impact we measure. We do recognize, for example, that there are cases where you're providing students with new course materials where there were no suitable course materials before. While you might not be saving students money, that's still a positive impact, and we do consider that as well. Next, maybe you're providing students with more interactive contents that enhance the learning experience in the classroom. That is another positive impact that we like to see. And finally, maybe you're creating a more inclusive resource. So maybe you're improving the accessibility of your course materials by creating a new OER. Maybe you're including more Indigenous knowledge and history and ways of knowing in your resource, or focusing on different EDI principles to improve course materials and make them more impactful for students. These are all different ways that impact can be measured, and we don't favor one particular type of impact over the other. Next, and these are two supplementary documents you will need to provide, and that is a budget and a timeline. So we have templates for both of these online that you can access on our website. So for the budget, we're just looking for a detailed itemized list of everything that you will be using the grant to pay for. So general rule of thumb is that you want to provide a description and a potential rate for each. So for example, let's say you are hiring a student assistant. The expense would be a student assistant, and you would explain perhaps that you are asking that student to help you import content into Pressbooks, the book publishing software, and finalize the formatting, and that because at your institution, that student, say, gets paid at a rate of $20 an hour based on your school's guidelines for paying students for their work. There are certain expenses that are ineligible that we will go over in a minute, and these are expenses that we will not allow you to use grant funding for. And then finally, we ask for a timeline. Again, there's a template online that you can use. So this is just a monthly breakdown of activities. We want you to focus on the main milestones for your project. So for example, if there needs to be a research phase, then you could break down that the research phase will happen in the first 3 months of the project. Or perhaps you have a phase where you're going to be drafting content. That could be another block of time. So those kind of like main milestone high level activities is what we need to see. We don't have to see it broken down as far as chapter 1 will be done in this month, chapter 2 will be done in this month, just that kind of high level. So in terms of expenses, we do have a set list of expenses that we do not allow grant money to be used for. So first is paying the salary of an individual already making a salary from the institution. So essentially what we're saying here is, say you're an instructor who is making this resource, and this is part of your job, we will not allow you to pay yourself additionally with the grant money. Same thing for anyone who works at your institution where they're making a salary from the institution and helping you with this kind of work would be part of their job. Next is the cost of attending conferences and travel. We do not pay for conferences with this. Our goal is that the funding is used for the resource itself. Next is administrative overhead fees. This would come potentially as a result of transferring the funding to your grant office. And finally, payments to a commercial publisher. So we are aware of the fact that nowadays there are options with some commercial publishers where you can pay a fee and then publish a textbook with that publisher. And with that fee, your book becomes openly licensed. We do not use these payments. We will not support these payments to a commercial publisher with the grant funding. Things that are eligible, though, are any sort of loss of salary. So say you're an instructor who applies for a course release and that impacts your pay. We could pay for that. Another thing is student assistance. Absolutely. We want to see students be involved in OER creation, and you are welcome to use funding for that. And then finally, any equipment that you need to create the OER. So to kind of give a sense of what the adjudicators will be looking for this year based on all of those different questions we've just gone through. First, we want to see a clear and detailed project description. We want to make sure that we do truly understand the project that we would theoretically be funding. So make sure your description is strong, make sure it's got enough detail in it. Another thing is a strong justification for the creation or adaptation of a new resource. Again, we just want to understand why this resource needs to exist and why current resources that are already out there aren't sufficient. So understanding why, say, you're not adopting an already existing OER. Next is that we want to make sure that this project is feasible so that your goals are reasonable and well scoped for a project of the scale you're proposing. Next, that we want to see a positive impact on student learning. Again, I will stress we are not going to prioritize one type of impact over another, but we do want to see a positive impact overall. Again, timeline and key activities are well scoped. They're manageable in 2 years, given that the expectation of grant recipients is that the project will be complete in 2 years, that the budget is appropriate. So again, that we don't see any of those ineligible expenses that I just listed here. That list is also available on our website. And finally, that you will adhere to our expectations. So using an open license, using an appropriate platform for publishing the OER, those sorts of things. And by appropriate platform, what we mean is that we will not restrict and say that you can only publish an OER on Pressbooks. However, whatever platform you choose to host your OER on, it needs to be openly available for students to freely access and does not require a login to access. So that's where things like Pressbooks, which can be freely shared once published, or GitHub websites, those sorts of things are definitely more than appropriate. So I'm going to pause here for now, and I would like to open the floor to questions. That's what I really like to spend a bulk of the time on.
Hi, Alexandra. We did have one question in the chat from Jules at NSCC. So asking just for clarification around the course release.
Yes.
So if you have course release costs, like to hire an instructor to fill in for you for that course time, yes, that's an eligible expense.
Yes.
It's basically if you're like, we don't, the whole point is no double dipping, basically. Being paid while you're on that leave, then that we can't be using the grant to also pay you, I guess is the bottom line.
Yeah, so think of it as supplementing loss of income, if there is a loss of income. Okay, thank you, Cynthia. I also see, oh, Sorry, go, Cynthia.
Oh, no. I just put mine down.
Okay, thank you. I see Taylor Hansen has their hand raised.
Hi, thank you. I have a clarifying question. With our project, we have a number of contributors who are current practitioners, so child and youth care practitioners, early childhood educators, but they also occasionally have taught part-time in our department and could be under a part-time, teaching a course with the department within that 2-year period.
Mm-hmm.
Would they be eligible for compensation separately for working on this project for the chapter they contribute, for example, where they are on a part-time contract for teaching, but not receiving a salary?
I would suggest you email me with a few more details just so I can
Okay.
understand the situation fully. My instinct would be, based on what you're saying, is if it's a limited term contract that's focused solely on teaching and say isn't, the full 2-year period, aka there will be periods where they are not making a salary from the institution. Those periods where they're not making salary would potentially be eligible. Again, I would need to know a bit more of the situation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'll email you.
Just looking. Do folks have more questions?
I don't see any other hands, and there aren't any in the chat. Oh, wait a second. Taylor's there yet.
I'll turn my
Go
camera
ahead,
on.
Taylor.
I'm going to take advantage. Okay, related to this, we also have some contributors who are not students and are also not faculty members. Would funding be available? Or if you had a consultant or someone coming in to provide training, those types of costs.
I would say likely yes. Again, need to know more details about what kind of specific, but a good example would be, say you hired an accessibility expert who doesn't work at your institution to do an audit of the book and needed to provide some sort of compensation. Those are absolutely eligible expenses.
Okay, wonderful.
So I'm assuming you mean like folks that work outside, like that are not part of the institution at all, like not affiliated whatsoever, correct? Then yes,
exactly.
absolutely. That is completely okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the same thing if you're hiring grad students or any type of help to work on the project. If that's their salary position to be working on this project, then their salary is eligible. But if in doubt, just contact Alexandra and she can speak to the specifics of your situation.
I've left my email on the first slide, and the slides will be available after, so you are more than welcome to check there. Does the team need to be from the Atlantic region, or can they be from other regions of Canada, with the lead being from NS? So as long as the lead applicant is affiliated with a post-secondary institute, publicly funded post-secondary institution in the Atlantic provinces, then it is completely okay, as long as the lead applicant is, and as long as the course material that you are proposing will be used in a credit-bearing course in a publicly funded post-secondary institution somewhere in the Atlantic region, then it's absolutely okay. So for example, if you work at St. Mary's University, you're the lead applicant, you're planning on using it in your 3rd-year course in anthropology, but you're bringing in folks and collaborators who are from other regions in Canada to help you, and perhaps they'll use it in their courses, that's completely okay, because you are the lead applicant and because you will be using the material in your course. I see another one in the
Yes,
chat.
Stephen.
Yes. So would having the textbook hosted on a university library be considered an appropriate platform for publishing? So the examples given are Acadia Scholar. So the two main things to ask yourself are, would it make the course material freely available? And also, does it require a login to access? Open educational resources, the principle behind them is that they are not just free to access for a set number of folks. Again, we do make exceptions for Indigenous knowledge, but they shouldn't be accessible only to a set group of people. They should be open and free to access for everyone. So without knowing too much about the Acadia Scholar platform, that would be the criteria that I would just ask yourself when you're looking at something.
Jackie had a question as well.
Yes. I can see your hand, Jackie. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. The little hand kept, sorry, I wasn't sure if you could see it.
It's okay.
Thank you for this. I have a question and I'm 99% sure I know the answer, but I just wanted to take advantage of this opportunity and put it out there. So the requirement that it's for use by educators and students in credit-bearing courses, I'm looking to design an OER that would be used by healthcare practitioners and would have accreditation assigned to it. So there would be kind of CE credits that would be obtained from completing the materials, and then they applied to the professional body to receive the credit. I feel like that's a no for this grant, but I just wanted to put it out there just to ask if that could apply in this case.
So this, just to double check that I'm understanding you correctly, this isn't, say, like, I'm going to make up a course title here, but Healthcare 101 at your institution. This is something outside of that, correct?
Correct. This would be material that healthcare, specifically physicians, but it could be adapted by others if they wanted to once I built it, would use towards their continuing education. So they would get continuing education credit because I'm planning to have it accredited by the national body.
Okay. We do tend to give priority to course materials that are used in credit-bearing courses. But if this is something you'd like to talk about further, say to do without a grant, you can always talk to me and I'm happy to discuss this further with you.
Absolutely. I just thought I would ask. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I just see in the chat that someone asked if Pressbooks can be accessed from everywhere. So I'll just read out the answer because Cynthia's already provided an answer, just so folks on the call know. Yes, once a book is published and made public from Pressbooks, it is accessible from anywhere. You yourself as the creator will need a login to work on the material while you're working on it. Anyone who is assisting you with creating the material will also require logins. Those logins are free to you. And you would go through me or someone at your institution to access an account. But to actually access the OER itself, once it's published, you don't need any sort of account for. Okay, I have a really great question here in the chat asking where this funding comes from. So we are currently the Council of Atlantic Academic Libraries is currently doing a pilot project with the 4 provincial governments of the Atlantic provinces, so Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland, who are providing us with funding through the Council of Atlantic Ministers for Education and Training. So the funding for these grants comes from our pilot project funding that we have to expand OER in the Atlantic region.
So it's basically funded by the 4 provincial governments at this time for a 3-year period. We have that funding.
So this is now our 2nd year of funding. This grant cycle will be part of the 2nd year of funding. So that's where it comes from. And that's why we've been able to offer more grants than we have in the past. No problem. More questions. How many grants? Okay, so this is hard to say only because we have 3 tiers of funding and it really depends on the applicant pool. So to give you a sense, I can kind of speak to last year, the 2024 cycle to give you a bit of a sense. But last year we were able to offer 9 grants, and this was a mix of adaptation grants and creation grants. So it depends, because the tiers are different, it really depends on the applicant pool. So for example, if we get a lot of applicants, say, who are predominantly asking for adaptation grants, which are worth $4,000, we're going to be able to offer more of those than, say, if we get an applicant pool that is predominantly folks asking for that $7,000 large scale creation grant, just because the set pool of funding. So unfortunately, I can't say for certain, but that can kind of hopefully give you a sense that we were able to offer 9 last year, and we have about a similar amount of funding this year to offer grants. Any questions? Compared to the success rate, again, it's really hard to say because it does depend on the applicant pool from year to year and how much folks are asking. So if we were to say I'm just going to make up numbers here, but say we had $10,000 to offer and we had someone come in with a creation grant, that's going to use up, 70% of what we have. And so there won't be as much funding left over. So we may fund fewer projects. But last year we had about 19 applicants and 9 successful recipients. It really does vary year to year, though, so I wouldn't say that that's necessarily how things will happen this year. I'll give a few more minutes for questions. Yes, Cynthia.
So just, I know you and I had talked about this yesterday, Alexandra, and I wasn't sure if you were going to address it, the idea of commercial textbooks.
Yeah, it was one of the ineligible expenses I listed.
Okay, thank you. I missed. I wasn't sure if I missed it.
So yeah, just to clarify, what Cynthia is referring to is we understand that there are situations in which publishers will offer that you can publish your textbook through them, and then if you pay a fee, and in my experience, I've seen these be around $10,000 fees, they will make that textbook open. We will not pay that fee. That is not an eligible expense with this money. We will not be giving government funding to commercial publishers, is the bottom line of it.
But if you have a textbook you own the rights to, and it's currently with a commercial publisher, and you wish to move it over or migrate it over to the open environment, that's a perfectly acceptable project proposal.
Okay.
And we have had those in the past. We've had ones where they were commercial textbooks and the author owned the rights to them, and they decided to move them over to Pressbooks to make them open.
I'll give another few minutes for questions if folks have any more questions, and then we can spend some time in breakout rooms. Cynthia, okay. So, is there a quality control process or built-in standards to follow? So are you talking, just to make sure I'm understanding, if you are asking about quality control process in terms of the content of the OER itself, because we are not subject experts in your fields, we ourselves will not be a part of any sort of review. However, we're currently in the process of setting up a peer review mechanism to support you should you want to solicit peer review and peer feedback for your project. Again, we are not the ones who can do that review. That is not something we would have the expertise to be able to do, but we can support you with any peer review of the content. And as Cynthia mentioned in the chat, the one thing that we do have expectations around and would review is accessibility. We do have accessibility standards that we ask you to follow. So that is one area where, yes, we would definitely have expectations for that. Okay. So another question, I may have sourced some other funding for a larger project of which CAAL might be a contributor under this OER program, presumably disclosing an overall plan in the application would be acceptable. Yes, so if you are seeking funding or grant funding from other bodies, we would want you to disclose that in the application. So for example, if your institution has an OER grant program and say you're able to receive $3,000 from that, but that's not enough to cover the project, so you apply to us for additional funding to kind of top that up. As long as you disclose that, that is what we're expecting. So that is what we ask with the application.
Yes, and also, so there's always the question of you have applied for funding, which you may not yet have been told whether you will receive that funding. So we will take that into account. So there may be a process whereby if you're awarded a grant that's higher than, well, like what that adds up to more than you need, if you are given the other funding, then we would have to figure out how to adjust your grant amount to adjust for the other funding that you may receive. We just understand there is some timing around when you hear about funding from different organizations. So yeah, we can adjust.
We absolutely can and will adjust, because we do understand that you might be wanting to apply for multiple grants just in case. So absolutely, we accommodate for that. I'll give it a few more minutes and then we can do some breakout rooms. Any more questions?
So the intention of the breakout rooms is to enable folks to talk amongst each other, to discuss your projects, what you're thinking, get feedback from others in the group if you like to, if you want to stay on. So we will be creating breakout rooms, although it depends on how many people are still left by the time we get there.
Yeah.
But it looks like potentially maybe 2 breakout rooms of 7.
I think that could work well, yeah. Oh wow.
We're getting smaller.
And breakout rooms, we're not going to include that as part of the recording. So this is just a free space to chat and like get your ideas heard. So
we're down to 10, so potentially we just don't do breakout rooms and folks can talk.
Yeah.
So this is a way, if you're considering an idea and you want to ask bounce it off some of the other folks in attendance, because some of them actually have received grants in the past, so they might have some ideas for you.
And we have myself and some of the other folks here who have adjudicated in the past and, have experience on that side of things as well.
Oh,
are people being bumped off? I just saw that in the chat.
We didn't bump anybody.
Okay, might just be Wi-Fi connections or something.
Okay. So does anybody out there have an idea or have a question about their project that they're wanting to see what others think about it, or things of that nature, or anything that you want to throw out there into the forum?
I'll throw out what I'm chewing on, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
Hi, folks, and Cynthia, it's nice to meet you. We've corresponded before. And hi, Alexandra, and everybody else. My name's Jules. I teach business at the Ivany campus of the Nova Scotia Community College. And I was the lucky recipient of one of the initial OER grants. I'm grateful for that. I'm just going to turn on my light here. So here's what I'm kind of considering, and I recently submitted an application to a research funding pool that NSCC offers, and I've also got a pending dialogue with an association who have an interest in this topic. Neither of which could come to fruition, and the whole idea is different, and so might not work out. And also, I think it's going to take a fair bit of work. But so here goes. It's an AI-based initiative that is targeted at business students and could have a wide-ranging application. And it's not rocket science, but I think it's unique in that I want to kind of package it up in something that's highly usable. And that is where simulated conversations between business people might be prompted, so engineered prompts that are fed into an AI large language model, whereby, for example, a student, this would be a student in an academic setting or a student in a business setting, someone trying to learn how to sell, for example, might orally speak into an AI and have an interactive conversation where the AI is the customer, and that customer has been trained to react to the conversation, the ovation that the salesperson is making, and provide a true to life interactive discussion to, for example, one of the courses I teach is selling to financial services, in this financial services environment. If I was a financial advisor and I was trying to get Alexandra Maraccio's business, I would, make several sales calls with her, a prospecting call, a qualifying call, a follow-up qualifying call, a presentation. And throughout all those dialogues, Alexandra and maybe her partner in the second or third conversation would join the conversation. And I would be building an understanding of you based on how you react. And so that all requires a case scenario that's well engineered, and we would train the AI on how to be the customer in that environment. Normally in AI, the AI is the salesperson, is the three dots that are blinking at the end of a chat bar as you're getting more and more frustrated. So we're trying to turn that around and create an oral environment and highly train these bots to be smart customers. You can imagine the same thing applying in a practice job interview or in a practice situation of almost any kind where you're trying to have a real dialogue. So the idea would be to create a series of scenarios and engineer those and test them, train the AI, and then basically write the OER component of it would be a traditional OER format to help the students and the teachers and the learners to actually get into this game. So there would be some selling skills content in a traditional textbook format, but it would be more about, okay, now we've told you how that works, let's practice it, sort of workbook style OER. So that's the concept. We have BA students and IT students would be the ones. Basically, BA students create the scenario, IT students basically write the code, BA students test it and teach it iteratively, and then we package it all together into a kind of a teaching and learning guide. So that's the idea. I have no idea how long it takes to train an AI, and neither can anybody else seem to tell me. So the budgets that I'm establishing, which all the money would go to students, are very seat of the pants. Yeah, that's the idea that I'm kicking around. So
yeah, it's quite interesting, and I appreciate the level of interactivity for students. I think that would be really valuable to students to get that kind of hands-on experience, that more workbook style that you're talking about. So I really appreciate that a lot.
yeah. So the intent would probably be to submit that as a creation. Yeah, so that's the one thing. I mean, go ahead. Yeah. Cynthia, go ahead.
Well, no, it was more of a, sorry, let me turn my camera on there. So that's one of the things for creation grants. There's things like niche areas or approaches that haven't been used in the past. So new and innovative approaches. So there may be books out there in that subject area, but they may not have used that particular approach to teaching and learning or things of that nature. And I said books, but I meant OERs because it doesn't have to be in a book format. But that's another way to frame the idea of creation grants are there to also encourage innovation in pedagogy. So, new ways of thinking about learning.
Absolutely. And that's also why it's listed, building student interactivity is listed as one of the impacts that we do consider as positive student impact. Because again, we do consider things more complexly beyond just, student savings, which absolutely saving students money is important, but pushing innovation in pedagogy, making things more interactive for students. All of these things are things that we value and that we want to see reflected in the values in the OER that get proposed. So that's why we look at it from multiple angles. And I think yours does fit that kind of enhancement of student learning.
I mean, I'm also keen just to have CAAL involved, no matter how much money is needed, which I really don't know. I mean, I guess I believe in what you're doing. And I was interested to see you're in year 2 of a 3-year pilot. I mean, this semester, I'm going to be harvesting the dialogues where students phone me to do all this stuff. So I get like 30 phone calls for an assignment, and they're only 2-minute phone calls, but it's, tedious. But I'm going to be harvesting that to train the AI. And I see this as a multi-year project. I mean, unless AI just gets so smart that, I mean, we might not be here in 2 years, but I would want to do it again next year and kind of retrain and use what we've learned in the first go to make the prompts even better. Cool. Okay, so let's thank you for your encouragement, and hopefully something will emerge by the 24th of February.
14th of February is when applications are due.
Valentine's Day. Jackie.
Hi. Hello. I am teaching currently EAL and ALP group as well, and teaching early childhood education. And I am trying to create an OER. I did create one OER previously with my coworkers without knowing about this funding. So I'm very interested in that there is a way that we can support our students and involve them. And especially my students are very unique, and I really want them to experience and then having their voice heard, and put it into this kind of a really very, I think, evidential proof into their journey. So I think that's kind of one of my goals as well. And then this book is for the course called Learning Through Play, which is one of the very core course that make them level 1 ECE. And I think it's a great that if we can collect some of the just the pedagogical documentation about the locals and from our, I think, provinces, because we have beautiful educators here, and often it's really hard to share some of those documentation that's really intentionally created within OER format. So that's my, I think, kind of a goal idea right now.
That's really great. I appreciate what you said about involving students. That is definitely something that we like to see, and that's definitely something we try to encourage. And that's also what you said about not being unsure of how to publish it. That's part of the reason why we leave the platform hosting a bit flexible, because while we do give access to the AtlanticOER Pressbooks, we do understand that Pressbooks isn't always suitable to every single project out there. So absolutely, we're open to hearing other platforms as long as they're appropriate platforms. We're happy to see them hosted elsewhere, because we understand that's complex. It's not as simple as everything could be done on Pressbooks. So we will support you with finding alternative platforms.
But yeah, there's a big chance that I might go with Pressbook.
Okay. Yeah, and absolutely, we're here with Pressbooks as well. And we'll give you all kinds of support with using Pressbooks. I oversee it myself, and we have other folks that can support you with Pressbooks. So there's a lot of resources out there to teach you how to use it. And it's fairly intuitive, I would say.
And we've had other creators who have used things like GitHub or a website or whatever. The most important part is that they are openly accessible to anyone. We're not limiting people to particular platforms. The intention is to make sure, though, that those platforms make the content open.
I got really excited about, when I find out about this OER and realized that, oh my goodness, like how many, like, students, I mean, it's great to have like a really thick book, but then for my own example, I had to go through like a statistic course for my thesis, which I'm not really interested in numbers at all, right? But then I had to pay like this thick book, which I used only for, yeah, just a very limited time. And if we had, certain OER for like students at least, right? They're like just entering and then, and all, every penny matters for their life. So, so that's why we are, I think, our team because I work for asynchronous eCampus program. So we are trying to make every textbook possible as an OER platform for our students, especially. So that's why, yeah. And the only book I missed, and then I tried to make it before, but then I just couldn't have my time, right? So that's why I like, okay, I really want to get this one done, and then this came up, and I know today is the date, right? A due date.
No,
To submit.
it's February 14th, so you've got another month.
February 14th. Oh my
Yes,
goodness. Yes. Okay.
no,
Thank goodness.
we purposely scheduled this session about a month before things were due so that you could get your questions answered and still have plenty of time to work on the application.
That's a great to know.
And for those who have used Pressbooks before or not, there are new functionalities being added to Pressbooks, including Grade Passback, which is being rolled out at all the institutions, or at least the institutions that we are able to roll it out to. But it is a feature that has been requested by creators in the past, the ability to have that grade pass back and have little quizzes and things like that embedded in the materials, the OERs. So that is, it's a new functionality they have rolled out to us.
We've got at least one book that I'm aware of that's currently testing the grade passback to make sure that it's all running. I'm working with Pressbooks and the technical support staff there just to make sure it's all running smoothly. And for folks who aren't as familiar with Pressbooks, so Pressbooks has something called H5P in it, which is something that allows you to build interactive content into the book itself. So let's just say you want to have an end of chapter quiz. H5P is what allows you to do that. And in the past, it was more of a self-assessment tool. So you would say a student comes across a quiz at the end of the chapter, they could go through, take the quiz, and then it would be graded for them and they would be told their grade. However, you would not have access to that. You wouldn't know what grade the student got or how they did on any of the interactive material. What Grade Passback allows is that if a student does that interactive quiz that exists at the end of a chapter, say, it will pop, and so the quiz will be graded the way that H5P normally works, but then that grade will be transferred into your LMS so that you can see the results for your students. And I think it's really great because either you can use that to actually like have the grades for those quizzes be a part of their grade, or if you want to do it as, say, a simple participation grade where if a student does all of the interactive content in the book, they get, say, 5% or something, or some sort of participation grade, you can do it that way. So it really does open up a lot of possibilities that we're very excited about. So it's great to see, exactly, formative assessment tool. So it's really great to see that this functionality will be available and is rolling out right now.
It's like we've gotten everybody, and you can always reach out to Alexandra later. Just OER at CAAL-CBPA.ca, and you will be able to get any questions answered in your process of developing your proposals. We're your facilitators at your institutions, but also Alexandra herself are always open to inquiries or questions. If you want to bounce some ideas off of people, Alexandra's there to help, because we have the benefit of seeing, and you can also look online to see previous projects that were successful. But if you're not quite sure, just reach out and ask.
We are here to support you through the process of applying.
Great. Well, thank you all for attending, and we hope to see lots of applications and proposals coming our way.
I look forward to it. Thanks, everyone.